because, you know, as the chair of the Codex committee, it's my job to talk to every members or observers who have interest to the agenda items. So as today, I already had a very full day with the discussion with Codex Secretariat on the whole agenda items. So I will use this opportunity to just a very quick brief you about the whole plan of the CCFA 53. So, you know, tomorrow and Saturday, and we are going to have the physical working group on GSFA and on endorsement and alignment. So tomorrow and Saturday, the physical working group on GSFA and alignment will have a very heavy workload, and they are going to discuss agenda item 5A, 5B, 5C, and 5 okay, 5A, B, C. I think it's a lot of documents and hundreds of papers will be discussed. You know, for CCFA, it's very difficult to understand the GSFA system, because when we develop the general standards on food additives, and we also create the problems between the cooperation between the GSFA and the commodity standards. So at the same time, we have alignment working group doing their work. So when some food additive provisions will be discussed in GSFA working group, and also alignment issue will also be raised regarding some specific provisions. And those two topics are linked with each other. So we hope after 2 days discussion, and the USA as the chair of the working group of GSFA, and Australia as the chair of the working group of alignment, now they are working together and trying to find all the relevant issues, and they will find a solution together and give a recommendation to the plenary. So with the basis of the discussion of the physical working group, and the report will be prepared by the physical working group chairs, and submit to the plenary. So for the whole plan of the plenary, you can see from the Codex website. And as the first day, we may focus on agenda item 1, 2, agenda item 3A, 3B. And on the second day, so we will focus on agenda item 5 on the GSFA. So if on the first day we finish agenda item 3, and we still have some time, and we can continue our discussion on agenda item 8 and 7, 8 and 9. But I don't think we can touch agenda item 10. So on the second day, and we will have a full day on discussion of GSFA. And at the first day lunchtime, there will be an in-session working group on INS, I think. And the second day lunchtime, we will have an in-session working group on priority list. So we will leave those two topics on the third day. So on Wednesday, the day 3, we will discuss agenda item agenda item 4 and agenda item 6, 7, and probably 10 and 11. So during the adoption of the agenda, based on the comments we have received, and also based on the requirement by the Commission, the standards of East might be discussed under the agenda of other business, which is proposed by China. And we can also see some other different opinion whether this committee should take this responsibility, because it's totally out of the term of reference of CCFA. But we will see how the committee will take care of it.
So this is for yeast, Dr. Fan, just to confirm, this is for yeast, right? To have a standard
yeast.
For yeast. Yes. Yeast. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Because this is the job assigned by the Commission.
Yeah.
So the CCFA have to take this job.
Yeah.
And for agenda item 2, I think there might be some discussion on the matters for action from the Nutrition Committee, because the Nutrition Committee proposed some changes to their infant formula or follow-up formula standards. And as a follow-up action, so the CCFA have to decide on how to deal with the fidelity provisions. For the CCNFSDU, both on the 42nd session and on 43rd session, which just finished on 2 weeks ago, I think. So, JECFA did a lot of evaluation, which is a risk assessment, gave the basis for this committee to develop our general standards on fidelity use. So, we for now we can foresee that the general agreement with the risk assessment output, and based on that, the CCFA can take a follow-up action to update the GSFA. But there are several outstanding issues might be discussed. And the first one is on the provisions on the benzoic acid, its source and derivatives. Since the JECFA evaluation has a clear recommendation, so then the CCFA may take action, for example, to delete relevant note from the benzoate acid provisions. And we can also see some comments from observers. They propose a different proposal, but we will see the discussion from member countries, what's their point of view. And also another issue is based on JECFA evaluation on riboflavins. So based on the riboflavins, there is a new specification on IS 1014, and this substance can be introduced into riboflavins. This is a group additive, and then some follow-up action can be taken by this committee, and most probably the GSFA working group will take care of it, or if the committee can agree, and some relevant provisions will be adopted by the committee directly if there is no objection. So also a new specification be produced by JECFA on their evaluation by FAO sites. So you can see the documents from 3B. So on the discussion of 4B on alignment, since there is a new proposal made by the chair of the electronic working group on the amendment to the procedure manual. So I think it's a big step, but the committee should take a consideration whether it's realistic for current time to make amendment proposal to the procedure manual. And our purpose is to try to avoid any further problem or inconsistency between GSFA and the commodity standards. But we understand that the procedure manual is very complicated, and also the format of commodity standards and something like that. So we will see the how the committee think about it. And for the 5E, the general information on the availability of data related to nitrate and nitrates, since there are just a few member countries provided the data, we will see whether JECFA think it's enough for them to do the evaluation. If not the case, we will probably decide to stop the work. And for the discussion paper on mapping food categories of GSFA to the FedEx2 database, and we can see the different opinions, whether the FedEx, the food X2 should be used by JECFA, and whether some other countries' food categories cannot be used, and what is the purpose to the map and this and that. And this work has been done by Japan and also Canada and Australia or USA. So based on the discussion, and different options can be made. And someone probably want to just stop here, and we think it's very useful for the mapping, but the mapping can be, in the future, can be used as a reference just for the sponsors for use internally by JECFA. And someone may propose it's very useful, and but the mapping is only with to the European food category, but also take consideration of other member countries' approach. So we will see. And for agenda item 9, discussion paper on the for the use of trisodium citrate. So for this agenda item, I can see the position from Egypt is against the proposal made by Brazil. So I would like to see seek your opinion, or what's your suggestion for next step? What should we do? Because from my personal point of view, in this paper, the proposal made by Brazil is already a little bit compromised. So for the countries who are against this proposal, and is there any constructive suggestion? And for the discussion paper on the use of additive in wine, and you can see there is a new proposal in Codex website on addendum. So I don't know whether the discussion will be very quick and we can smoothly get the conclusion. So this is my hope. And if we still have some time, and then we can discuss whether the East standards can be undertaken by this committee or not. Over. So this is what I want to share.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Fan. With your permission then, Dr. Fan and distinguished colleagues, I'm going to go very briefly through the agenda. Basically, I think Dr. Fan helped a lot actually in reviewing the main agenda items. I'm just going to go through them very briefly, and then actually offer an opportunity for you to ask questions to Dr. Fan, or actually to clarify your positions based on the questions that he asked as well. So I'm using this document that I shared with you through the WhatsApp group, which is essentially the general template document that we generate as part of the analysis of agenda items. Now, I would like to preface this with the fact that CCFA, as you know, is a very heavy technical committee. It's basically a very big producer of standards. And this is our first time in the where we are doing the analysis of the agenda items. And we're probably not giving this committee its due consideration. I think we will have to think in the future of a different approach to tackle this one. So what we are doing this time is just an initial way of handling the analysis of the agenda items. So as was mentioned by Dr. Fan, a lot of the work will be happening during the physical working groups that are taking place before the meeting. But then there are a number of agenda items that will be discussed, of course, in plenary. Agenda item 2, which contains a number of matters referred. And in this particular analysis, we've identified a matter referred in particular from the CCFO 27 in relation to the inclusion of mono and diglycerides of fatty acids that were found to be technologically justified for use as anti-foaming agents in oils. So, and this excludes virgin and cold pressed oils. And again, in this particular case, the alignment process was actually conducted, and there doesn't seem to be any impediment for this to be considered by CCFA. Now, of course, what I omitted to say is, of course, CCFA will be considering a number of information items from CAC 44, CAC 45, and the various executive committees. There are also other matters referred for action pertaining to CCFA 52, and there is a number of them. I actually chose here just an example, for example, to address the inconsistencies related to the mention of potassium silicate. If we go to agenda item 3A, which is essentially the matters of interest arising from JECFA and the various meetings of JECFA, particularly the 92nd and the 95th meeting of JECFA, I believe that this will be an opportunity for WHO in particular, from the JECFA Secretariat, to provide an update on non-sugar sweeteners, because there was a report that was published in April 2022 that conducted a systematic review that brought together most of the current scientific evidence on the health effects of non-sugar sweetener use. And again, in this particular case, individual non-sugar sweeteners, of course, are studied by JECFA, and JECFA comes up generally with the acceptable daily intakes that corroborate the safety of these products. What WHO also has reached is that there are a number of randomized controlled trials that suggested, of course, that non-sugar sweeteners would have little impact on glucose metabolism, and in fact result in lower body weight when coupled with energy restriction in the short term. Where there are some questions, and this is not a safety question, it's more in relation with the potential impact of these products on maintaining weight loss. Here, the consensus is not there on whether non-sugar sweeteners are effective for such long-term effect to maintain weight loss. Now, as mentioned also by Dr. Fan, JECFA will be informing CCFA of some updates on ADIs, and I think one that is noteworthy mentioned by Dr. Fan is the update on benzoates. Here, there is an increase, in fact, of the ADI that was proposed by JECFA, and as a result, because you have higher ADIs, you will have possibility of reduction of limitation in relation with dietary exposures. And this will lead to a consideration by CCFA to lift some of the restrictions. I believe that some of the restrictions were included in a note in the standard, basically limiting some potential use because of the possibility of overexposure. Now that possibility is lifted because the ADI is higher. So this will have an impact on the discussion by CCFA. Agenda item 3B related to the proposed draft specifications for identity and purity of food additives, again coming from the JECFA assessments. Here, what JECFA will do is will be updating the committee on proposed draft specifications for the identity and purity of a number of food additives. I'm not going to go through them. I listed them here in the document for your information, both the ones coming from JECFA 92 and from JECFA 95. Based on our analysis, we see that most of the comments are supportive of the proposed specifications, and basically it would be recommended to support their adoption. Agenda item 4A related to the endorsement and or the revision of maximum levels of food additives and processing aids in Codex standards. Here, CCFA will be invited to consider for endorsement a number of food additive provisions that are forwarded by a number of commodity committees. And again, here, I listed them here, a number of committees, including the Spice Committee, including also some regional committee like CC Africa, but also CC Asia. And based also on our analysis, there doesn't seem to be any objection that would be supported by Codex procedural matters that would impede the endorsement of these provisions. And again, really, this work supports the advancement of food additive alignment between Codex standards in the commodity standards and the GSFA, and the consistency in Codex procedures, as was mentioned by Dr. Fan. So again, this is part of that effort to maintain such consistency. Now, the bulk of the work, as was mentioned by Dr. Fan, will be undertaken by two key electronic working groups, but also actually that will be meeting physically. So the working group on alignment, which is really working diligently on the alignment of the food additive provisions between the commodity standards and the GSFA standards. But also there is the working group on the GSFA, which is practically, I would say, the bread and butter of CCFA. And here, it was, I mean, it would take me too long. And like Dr. Fan mentioned, you know, there are so many technical documents that were proposed. So again, this is really an ongoing work. It's very meticulous. It examines various provisions of food additives in commodity standards, and it tries, well, it's ensuring alignment with GSFA provisions. When we looked at most of the documents that were submitted, a lot of the documents were coming, or a lot of the standards that were reviewed were related to milk and milk product standards. So CCMMP commodity standards. And again, there will be discussions, of course, of each element here. But the item that I would like to bring to your attention is, and this was mentioned by Dr. Fan, was whether or not it is judicious at this time to consider amendments to the procedural manual in relation with this alignment. And I guess, as was discussed by Dr. Fan, given that this work is already ongoing and it hasn't finished, it may be premature at this point in time to consider changes to the procedural manual, and rather actually to let the work be close to completion or get to completion, and at that point really to consider any type of amendment to the procedural manual that will take stock from the learnings that would have been achieved as a result of this alignment work. So I believe that this is an item that will be discussed by CCFA53 under the leadership of Dr. Fan. Now, in relation to the GSFA, there are a number of standards that will be considered. And again, here it would have taken me probably the entire day to go through them. So I just chose to take some highlights: colors in French fries, provisions for food additives in formulated juice and nectars. There are some provisions related to artificial sweeteners. But what I would like to mention here is that there may be a discussion to have a position on titanium dioxide as you know, so titanium dioxide is subject to international discussion right now. And there are some divergent international opinions, in particular as a result of the EFSA most recent assessment, which doesn't seem to be necessarily agreed upon by other jurisdictions. So here, I guess the discussion would be, given that JECFA is already planning to evaluate titanium dioxide in November of 2023, so at the end of this year. So even if the item is introduced in the STEP process, it would be very important to hold off the discussion until JECFA completes its assessment that is planned in November. And finally, what I would like to say is that there are two items related to Agenda Item 8, Agenda Item 9 and 10. Those are the discussion papers related to the GSFA food categories and their alignment with the FoodX2 database. So this is an important item for consideration because essentially it will influence the way risk assessment is going to be conducted by JECFA, but also the way data will be submitted to JECFA by proponents of food additives. So having an agreement on the way the food categories are listed is actually important. FoodX2, as you know, is now becoming a model database. It has been developed by EFSA, but it has been also adopted by a number of countries, a number of risk assessment agencies, sometimes actually with modifications, because FoodX2, of course, is based on the European dietary model. And sometimes it needs to be amended in order to capture other categories of food beyond the dietary habits and the dietary components of Europe. So a discussion about how do we align that is very important because it will really inform future risk assessment activities supporting CCFA's work. And there are two items here, item 9 and 10, related to the food additive provision for trisodium citrate and its possible addition to fluid milk. This proposal was made by Brazil, supported by a number of Latin American countries, but it seems to be opposed by a number of African countries. And we will see maybe the discussion later in the dialogue that I had with the Canadian delegation. There is also the item for discussion on the use of food additives in the production of wine, and particularly the reference that is proposed to the enological standards from the OIV, the International Organization for Wine and Vine. So again, this is a discussion paper that will help facilitate moving forward some standards that are currently held at step 7, I believe, and that are waiting for a discussion on how the reference to the OIV standards would be made.